Good morning, everybody. This class is brought to you by Mountain Dew. So, got a couple of things. Columbia Mission Trip meeting, if you're interested in going this summer, June 27th to July 6th. Meeting's going to be in here at 5 o'clock. Surge weekend, that's for everybody. And so, if you want to be part of that, especially for adults and parents, Friday night, and their kids, Friday and Saturday, and then for youth, all weekend long. And then camp deadline, so if you have kids that are old enough to go to kids camp, the deadline is February 4th coming up. And then all day today is evangelism conference, and so Pastor Danny, Brother Danny is back with us preaching this morning, and then tonight is Shane Pruitt. Both of them top notch, two different type of preachers, but both are going to be great. And then tomorrow it's all day, different speakers all throughout the day. So if you have time, come on by. You'll be blessed by the music and the preaching and everything tomorrow. So, all right, we're going to be in Genesis chapter 11, talking about the Tower of Babel. So we continue our series. So kind of our icebreaker question for today: what are some advertising slogans or jingles that stick in your mind?
Oh,
Liberty, that BK, have it your way.
Have it your way.
You're wrong.
Arby's, we got the meats, and then during COVID, it was in half the seats. We used to say
Nationwide is on your side.
Nationwide is on your side.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Oh yeah, they got me for that one.
Just do it.
Which way? It's us now.
1-800. Let's call that's all.
That's it, yep.
We'll call that's all. Yep. And why do you remember? Why are they so effective?
They're catchy, they rhyme, or they're musical.
They're annoying.
They play them
They're repetitive.
times, and so you hear it a lot.
I don't know if any of you are Office fans, but there's one where Andy's trying to remember, like,
Oh, yeah.
the Kit Kat bar, but break me a piece of that. And then, like, he's coming up with all these different things, he can't remember what it is. Kit Kat bar, yeah. So, yeah, they make these slogans so that we remember them. They have these jingles so we remember them. They're a way of making it stick in our mind and things like that. The only problem is that you guys probably didn't desire to memorize those little jingles, did you? Or memorize what it is. And so it's kind of like we're not in control of that. And so sometimes advertising slogan or marketing and the way that they're presenting it to us, it gets us to the jingle, and then we'll remember it when we need it, whether we want to or not. And so as we jump into our lesson today, there's a lot of outside influence on us as Christians, as believers. We try to do the right thing, but there's so many influences outside of what we can control that are speaking into our lives, and we got to be cautious of that. And really, the Tower of Babel, that's the moral or the point of the lesson, is that there's so many people. They're trying to gather all the people together in one place to make a name for themselves. Just like these businesses, they want to make a name for themselves, so they come up with these clever jingles or ways to get our information or to gather information and to use it. All right, so Genesis chapter 11, 1-4, if someone could read that to get us started.
Now the whole earth had one language and the same words, and as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and the bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth."
All right, so Shinar is basically Kuwait or in Iraq. In that area, the southern part of it. Everyone spoke the same language, and that's not a positive or a negative, but communication is very easy. That's kind of like our takeaway, is that everybody can speak the same language. You don't have to have a translator. You don't have to ask, what does this mean or anything. Everybody's speaking the same language, and so it's easy to gather people together. So this is about 100 years after the flood and about 4,200 BC. So 4 generations from Noah's sons. And this is what the world's like. It's expanding. There's multiple generations. People are moving and going different places. But God told him to do that. And God said to spread out, to inhabit the earth, to enjoy his creation, and to create cities and families and places all over. And so that was God's plan. But what we're going to see is that man had a plan. Well, if we could build a big enough kingdom that we can draw all the people back to ourselves, we can be like God, or we can be powerful. We can have everything in our control. And so they begin to build this tower, this place, this fortified city for them to live in. And so at first when I read that, like, I kind of looked over the idea that they were making brick and they had mortar and things like that. And I know it's been a long time. It's been thousands of years, like 1,100 to 1,500 years since creation and things like that. But to think about the technology to be able to build this, or like the pyramids would come after this point, and to think about the technology that would create the pyramids and things like that. And we think about our technology today, it's different because ours is electronic, theirs is manual, and like how they do everything. But it's still technology. It's still man taking what God has given and then being able to create it for something else. And it's awesome to see how much God has created us with this ingenuity to be able to build and to construct and to take what he has given us for something good, or in this case, going to kind of take it in the wrong direction. And we know from the genealogies that happen at the end of chapter 10 that most of the major cities that you would think of in the Old Testament, like Egypt or Babylon, they're not created yet. They come from the line of Noah, so his kids, and so they founded that city. They would name it after themselves. And then a lot of times you're like, well, I thought it was this city, or I thought the name of that city was this. And then it just depends on what time frame we're in. Are we in the Hebrew language, or are we getting to the Greek language, or are we getting to modern day? And so a lot of times the name changes or tweaks a little bit because of the language that is spoken in those cities. And so even the bigger cities are not created. So everybody is just all small cities spread out everywhere, and they want to build this place for themselves. And God does not want them to, because the bigger the city, the more prominent the city in the known world. What kind of things or reputations come with huge cities? Chicago? What kind of reputations come with Chicago?
Yeah, I think that one's pretty funny coming down to the south. I feel like everybody, if you've never been there, you think like everybody gets shot. You can't walk around without gun violence.
Yeah. Or think of other big countries like New York City.
Stinks now.
I ain't playing.
We start to think, oh, they're liberal, or we got crime. There's so many people, sin, crude.
Kind of a selfish environment.
Selfish.
All about being better.
Yeah, and I think that is why God did not want the Tower of Babel, is because that's what could be the result. And so the reason why he's looking down and wondering why they're doing this, but for man, we strive towards this idea of power or fame or making yourself known. There's this pride in that we want to create something that we're known for, or leave a legacy and things like that. And so that's the desire of man, and then God is going to intervene on it. And this tower would draw attention to the people, and it would become a cross point. It would be a place where everybody would know. It would be a reference point to the known world at that point. And now, we don't know really what type of tower. We're pretty sure it's not like all the way up in the sky. It's not built that tall. But at the same time, it would be taller than anything else that was created. But anything over probably 10 feet is taller than anything else that was created. But, so I have these pictures of different places. Who was it? Holly, you said you've been to like the Mayan ruins that look a little bit like that? and then that's like a picture that somebody thought it might look like, and that's another one, and there's the pyramids, and most all cultures or people groups that have lived from that point till this point have something like this in their history, that you can see what is left of it, which was interesting to me because it's like, well, oh, they must have communicated or they must know how. But no, it's because that's what they knew at this point. They knew how to make brick, they knew how to build, they knew how to construct. And then as we look at when God's going to change their language and move them, they all take what they have with them. And so they build what they know, what they saw and what they had before. And a lot of times, the tops of these would be a sacrifice. It would be a place to make sacrifices. And so if you're a follower of Yahweh, then you would make sacrifices according to his laws and rules with the animals and things like that. And other cultures, it could be a child, it could be animals, it could be all different types of sacrifices. But all of them have this kind of common theme of building these constructing these places of worship, places of protection, and places for sacrifice to happen. And so it's very common all over the world because of it. And I think it all comes back to the Tower of Babel. And so the question, kind of get us back onto our own pride. How do people try to make a name for themselves today? And then why do they do it? What are some of the ways people try to make a name for themselves?
Commercialize themselves.
Yeah, just go all in on the social media and influencer and things like that. Yeah.
People try to outwork other people and try to.
Yeah, there's like the competitiveness within your jobs. Who does better? Sports, really easy to try to make a name for yourself. Put yourself out there to put yourself away from the pack, to stand out. What do you think the driving force behind all of that is?
Success.
Success, yeah. Money, finding worth in what you do. Yeah, there's all different reasons. All of it comes back to pride or selfish motives. I guess not every time, but at the same time, a lot of it does come back to that selfish motive. How can this set me apart? How can I make money off this? How can this make me look better? And so with that, if you have one language and one people group, then it's easy to communicate that and to draw power, and whoever's charismatic will go to the top. But if there's multiple languages and you can't communicate and you can't rally the people together, it's going to be very hard. And so we're going to look at how God intervenes, Genesis 11:5-7.
Then the Lord came down to look over the city and the tower that the humans were building. The Lord said, "If they have begun to do this as one people, all having the same language, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let's go down there and confuse their language so that they will not understand one another's speech."
So at the beginning of this, this is the Lord says, then the Lord came down to look over the city. And there's many different ways to interpret that. It could be that he literally came down, physical form, saw what was happening, walked around the people. Could have came in spirit, kind of unknown, like an angel, or just a figure of speech, meaning that he came down. But I think it's more of a literal than it is a figurative speech or even the spirit. So that would mean that Jesus is the one, or bodily form, Jesus of the Trinity came and walked among the people, blended in. He was one of them. He didn't stand out or anything like that. And the Lord said if they have begun to do this as one people having the same language, nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. And at first this might sound like, man, maybe God's threatened by man. Maybe God is scared that man could really do something, or it can become too powerful because they have one language. And I don't think it's a thing that God is holding back. He knows the potential of wickedness and evil that could come from mankind all having the same language, seeing what has happened. After the end of Noah and the flood, he says that he's never going to flood the earth again. And the reason behind it is because man is wicked from their youth. They're sinful from their youth. The meaning that God knows that we are sinful people, that we are bent towards sin, that we are left to our own desires and passions and things like that, it's going to be used for bad instead of good most of the time. And so without a changed heart, without a changed life through Jesus, then when mankind gets together and there's no morals or no standards, then things are going to get out of control. And I think that's why he's saying that we need to do something. And then a subtle reference to the Trinity, come, let's go down there and confuse their language so that they will not understand one another's speech. And so when we think about how hard it is to communicate with people just in general, and then have a language barrier in it. That's why we have our question today of the different countries that you've been to. And we joked a lot because some of those are just cruise ports, so we really didn't communicate with the people very much, or the ones that we did spoke English. But of all the other ones, I mean, if you're visiting their culture and their places, going from city to city, you got to know their language. They're not really going to bend a whole lot towards you unless it's hospitality like hotels and things like that. But the normal people aren't going to speak English. And so anybody have any good illustrations of being in another country trying to communicate and not being able to? Anybody?
Well, when I went to Italy with the band, we went to Venice, and they kind of let us have free reign of the city and go off because we were in college. And we were just supposed to go back to the train station and get ourselves on a train and take it back to our hotel. And we had, my little group had decided to let's venture deeper into Venice. And not just the, little touristy spots. So we just kept walking down the little alleys or whatever, and we ended up in the part of Venice that is like true Italy, where there's not a lot of tourists, and all those people did not speak English. And at that point, we were lost, and we needed to get back to the train station. But I had been doing a little bit of Duolingo before this trip, and I stopped in a store, and I was use the map and a few of the words that I did know, and I was able to get somebody to kind of give us directions on back to the train station. We made it, but it was interesting.
Yes. Yeah, mission trips a lot of times are like that because you're going to a place where you're working with the lower income, and so they don't get English classes in their schools and things like that. And a lot of times in Colombia, those kids, they just start yelling at you in Spanish. You're like, yeah, I have no idea what you're saying. Yes.
Google Translate.
Yeah, it does. It helps a lot. And now it's getting so common that if you pull out your phone, they're like, yes. Like kids, or if you're at a restaurant, if you're anywhere, they get excited when you pull out Google Translate because they're getting used to it. It's part of their custom and things like that. But yeah. The other thing was when you don't know the language, don't say yes or no to much of anything because you don't know what you're saying yes to or what you're agreeing to or what you're going to do. But yeah, so if the language is confused, it is hard to rally people together. It is hard to bring them together and to do what they're setting out to do here. All right, so in this, how can you see God's grace in a way he moved against the residents of Shinar? How is God's grace shown here? What's the definition of grace again?
Giving us what we don't deserve.
He didn't strike them down.
Yeah, I don't say anything.
Yeah.
He saw what was coming and tried to protect them from it.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of times it might not seem fair in the moment, or they don't know what God is up to or why he's holding you back from something. But it could be his grace that is protecting you from something that you don't know is there. Since he is all-knowing, he knows how everything's going to turn out, what everything would turn out like that.
If we were to build too fast, too soon, I would have made a lot more mistakes. So just telling them that, hey, just take it easy, do it the right way, and it'll be all right.
Does anybody, I couldn't think of one personally, but does anybody have a testimony of where maybe you thought God was holding back, or you weren't sure, but then in the end you saw God's grace in that situation? Becky, you date anybody? And
That was rude.
just trying to help you out, give you some illustrations.
I mean, call out.
I had at the job I have now. I applied for it 2 years before, and I interviewed, and I was like, I didn't get it. I mean, I just knew I didn't get it. And then and another guy had got it, and 2 years later, they called me back. It was like, hey, I'm not going to interview you, like, you have the job if you want it, And so, like, at the time, I was like, kind of down almost, you're like, man, like, that's the job I want, And then it took some time.
So that other guy was so bad, they're like, you don't need to interview, just come on. we saw the wrong that we did here. You were the right person. Yeah. And some it is in God's timing, and there's probably so many other situations or stories that we're going to find out in heaven of how God protected and how God led our families or ourselves in those different ways. And then the end, Genesis 11, 8 through 9, the people are dispersed as we read that.
So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth.
So in an instant, God changed the one language within their minds and gave each people group their own new language. This in turn disrupted the unity, the fellowship, stopped the work, and defeated the stated purpose of the residents of Babel, meaning that they desired to create a nation for themselves, a name for themselves, and to create this great tower that they would have this be known for. And just by changing their language, it stopped everything. It changed everything in this. And what I was talking about earlier, like just depending on language and things like that, the name changes, but Babel turns to Babylon, and Babylon we know is always part of the scriptures all the way to the end in Revelation. But Babel and Babylon are just translations of the same word and same place. The Hebrew word, there's a play on words. The term Babel and the verb meaning to confuse sound alike. So if you were to say both of those in the Hebrew, they would sound very close to each other. And so it's a play on words on why in our scriptures it's like that. In scripture, the city of Babylon again becomes a famous city, or becomes famous for the idea of being human, rebellious, sinful, even into the book of Revelation. And the other thing that's interesting is, like the flood, that it's many ancient cultures all have this kind of flood story, and they fit it into who they are, either religiously or in their past. The same is true of this, of how languages became. And there's a lot of big words in here, but basically, from 2000 BC, like there are all these different Mesopotamian, so Mesopotamia is like this area that is around Iraq, Iran, into Israel, and down into Egypt. All this region right here, they all have this same concept of a language all being the same, and then it being confused, of ziggurats, or these mountains, or these Babel towers, and a story that goes along with it. And then it kind of fits into their religion or their culture or their people, and they take it for themselves. even King Nebuchadnezzar, who was king in Babylon, he wrote about this tower and that, that he wanted to repair the nearby tower, which is probably this exact spot, that King Nebuchadnezzar wanted to go back and build this back up. Again, Nebuchadnezzar is one of the most prideful people. He is king over so much. He is in control of so much area of this area. So he wants to continue his legacy, which was probably one of the monuments for religion in that area. And then they found, so the people find their people. So if you spoke the same language and you're like, oh, you speak the same language as me, you would gather with those people and you would start your cities and then move from there to different places and things like that. Again, this doesn't explain everything or how people are all over the globe and things like that. I don't really have a good example for that or illustration for that or good answer to how they all spread to all these different places, but there's probably people that traveled across oceans and water way before Christopher Columbus, that people traveled from different places. We talked about how close Russia and Alaska are, and so maybe there's a landmass at this point, either frozen or open, that they can travel from one side to the other or take a boat or travel from one side to the other. We know boats were created by this time since we have Noah, so they got a concept of it. So as people's language changed, people moved, they get around their people group and they become their own. Some estimate that there was probably like 100 different languages that God changed it up to the point where it was really small groups of people. Like he really broke it up. It wasn't like 2 languages and now there's a couple 100,000 in each group, but it's spread out their language. And today there's over 7,000 different people groups or people languages of people that speak different languages and things like that. And so it is even more compound today. And to understand that, and what we need to understand from that is why the gospel is so hard to get to these people, to get to unreached people groups, is because there's no language. There's nobody that can just walk in and start talking to them about Jesus because there's no language. And so it takes somebody to develop a written part of their language and then transfer that to the Bible and then be able to tell the stories and things like that. It takes a long time and a lot of work, a lot of finances, a lot of different things that hinder the gospel to go into people that don't have the Bible in their language, and things like that. So, all right. In the end, these are our 3 points. These are the things that we want to have as our takeaway. Believers must safeguard against selfish motives. Just think about why you desire the things that you want, or the things that you strive to get better at, and the things that you want as far as titles and things like that. What is the motive behind it? And keep it in check with who God is. The unity of believers should be rooted in their obedience to God's plan. I think that's powerful. That's why there's good churches and churches that are struggling, is the unity of the believers. What is the mission? What is the point of why we're gathering together? And then believers can trust God to help them fulfill his purposes. And so God has told us and directed us in his word to do certain things and to be about certain things. And the more we trust him, the more we seek him, the more we'll fulfill his purposes for our lives, which are better than any purpose we can give ourselves. So, any questions, anything? All right. Very good. Let me pray. Our Father, we thank you for this day, and again, another opportunity to gather together to look at your word, and just pray that your Spirit would continue to speak to us this week, that we'd meditate on it and think about our motives behind who we are and what we want to do and what we're striving to become. And Father, that we would align that with your will for our lives, and Father, that you would just continue to sanctify us and to set us apart as a people, individually, and then as well as a group, as a life group, that we could be on mission for you to make a difference in our world, where you have us. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right. Any prayer?